The Death Card. This July 2022, I've released a forecast on Arainum.com detailing the ascendant influencing accents and energies of each day. That is, through the cards, I attempt to determine how you should meet the overall external and internal events of the month by pulling cards, and I attempt to offer some guidance as to how we should react to those events. I play tarot with 2 decks, although I'm familiar enough with 3. At this time, I would like to speak highly of the Mythic Oracle deck by Carissa Mellado, the Rider-Waite by Arthur Edward Waite, and Guido Crapax's Valentina. The intention of this podcast is a desultory discussion of tarot, for they really are only playing cards, and it is only a game. Featuring a spotlight on the epicenter of the deck, the Death card. The Grim Reaper is the rider of the Rider-Waite, the Aragorn of the Fellowship, the ominous Deus Ex Machina. The tarot affords us insight into behaviours that we only begin to confront within ourselves through many years of therapy. I could not possibly know that had I not been through those years of therapy, and of course the cards do not replace the benefits of therapy or counselling, but tarot does accompany both therapy and counselling very well. The purpose of the tarot is that it helps us to identify the behaviours that keep us reliving our personal stories, to prepare us for them, to alert us to the archetypes of our personal pantheons. But first, what is the nature of tarot? For me, obstacle and solution, crisis and opportunity, balance and imbalance, chaos and order. The tarot illustrates the behavioural compulsions and inclinations of humanity by depicting us and our habits as and through archetypal portraits of eponymous characters such as that of the Death card and the Empress, with symbols of beingness signified through details such as colour, composition and meanings which carry inherent details that help tarot readers to create a narrative to explain our cycles of behaviour, ideally accompanied by the outside perspective of a gifted reader. I estimate from personal experience that it takes at least 10 years of having a good time and even a really bad time to learn tarot, and you need to do the personal work. They require study and self-reflection and interacting with a lot of art. Eventually the good luck of being served a brave and honest querent or 10. But it is how we interact with art that separates readers, and that is what you as a querent might want to consider when you are choosing a reader for yourself. How does your favourite reader understand the cards before them? In my experience, everything depends upon the reader's personal visual landscape, and that is why I prefer artistic tarot readers, though I imagine to one day meet a great scientist who shares my affinity for the tarot, because science and maths are a language that I cannot fathom, that I imagine is very present in the cards to the right alchemist or reader. Everyone that looks at the tarot should arrive at their own personal conclusions as to what the cards depict. In The Art of War, Sun Tzu writes that there are not more than 5 musical notes, yet the combinations of these 5 give rise to more melodies than can ever be heard. There are 78 cards in the organised Tarot Gamers deck, and they interact with spreads through what could seem like a possibility of infinite stories, which surmount to one. Only the details change. For the meaning of each card changes according to its position in a spread. In that sense, there is nothing altogether precise in the cards for me. The story changes almost every time you visit them about an obstacle, and that is an aspect of the game that keeps my interest. Tarot does not get boring, but it does get painful. For example, obstacle: is John Doe cheating on Jane Doe? She really wants to know. If the cards say yes, of course I will always reply with the disclaimer, the cards say yes. Although the more diplomatic reader might avoid the question because a distressed querent might leave a blunt reader for a nicer one. Tarot is still a form of divination, not to be confused with psychic prediction. It's not psychic prediction. Usually, the question being asked really isn't often synonymous with the querent's real problem. It's unlikely your problems change. In fact, if your behaviours usually don't change. The journey you take with the cards is to eventually know thyself, even if you're asking about John Doe. Is John Doe cheating on me? The obstacle might be that you are attracted to people that remind you of family members that you wish you could have had a better understanding of. Turn the focus on you. But is John Doe cheating on me? Solution: look prettier. Solution: spend more money on looking prettier. If I were giving a reading with my Guido Crapax deck, I would not hesitate to provide this as advice. It's very shallow, and it doesn't fix the problem of cheating or the hurt it causes, but there's really nothing unspiritual about wanting to look nice. I'm unsure that other people are a good motivation for wanting to look nice, though. Solution: turn a blind eye. But don't do it because you're lonely. Do it because you love the person for who they really are, and everyone is learning life lessons. Solution: leave him for someone else. Though I'm not certain that your karma won't continue with that person. That is, they might do it to you too. Solution: an eye for an eye. Get revenge and establish immediate karmic balance, though I'm not certain that's something a person can possibly attain with another person, because you don't know what they might have done to you in a past life, if you believe in reincarnation. Solution: learn that I am altogether too interested in what other people are doing and that I need to mind my own business. Solution: go back to Dad and fix your relationship and tell Dad about John Doe. John Doe might be how much you miss Dad. And really the final solution is the better one karmically. One needs to evaluate their actions from a karmic perspective, and I do try to. Now I would like to discuss the most iconic card in the deck, for me, the Death card. Most famously, I've found that gifted readers have justified the card through discouraging querents from assuming the literal suggestion of physical death, and even divulging that death is a useful term for describing the constant aspect of reality that accompanies daily life. Removed of the stigma associated with being dealt that card, when we get that card we might console ourselves in the knowledge that we die social deaths all of the time. I picture an accomplished sportsman who associates the death card with the loss of a game. We rise and fall in meeting with all varieties of occasion, and at times our failings do feel to us as a kind of death. In the course of life, that is, for most of us, an aspect of normality. One dies when one embarrasses oneself, perhaps, but the card is interesting because it teaches us our worst fears. That accomplished sportsman could hypothetically rush to associate that card with tragic injury, and some might criticize that the tarot invites misfortune into our subconsciouses, and that invites a lot of fear. The sportsman could get an injury after receiving that worrisome thought and giving it attention. A comforting spiritual reader might see that card and avoid their initial thoughts and tell the querent to have no fear. There are deep life lessons available to us through the tarot which can become powerful mantras. The sportsman might choose to consider the mantra and adopt a life program that involved changing fear-controlled behaviors and receive an injury as a result. Sometimes we might need to accept that we can't run from our stories, and that could be the message of the death card for the sportsman. A tarot reader with more time might want to offer all of the imaginable advices. Invest in a really good physiotherapist and rest more. Or do nothing motivated by fear. You'll die eventually, and there is nothing worse than being afraid of something you want. Tragic injury is often regarded as an inevitability in the life cycle of most athletes anyway. This segment of discussion pertains to the particulars of the details which have been assigned to the specifics of the pictures depicted on the cards that speak to me personally. That is what you as my querent should want to know in listening to this reading, what captures my attention in the cards. First of all, for spiritually minded audiences, few or many, I am seduced by the particulars and associations of that which is cloaked in darkness, mystery, and secrets. I believe that is where we discover new hypotheses, whereby we try to confront old obstacles with new solutions. Allow me to digress. Through practicing the art of manifestation with Esther, Jerry, and Abraham Hicks, I learned of the term source. My childlike understanding of the sciences led me to and through a thought journey. Energy is neither created nor is it destroyed, and yet in this universe there are explosions of energy and stars which are born which eventually die. In all likelihood they existed before their birth and after their death, and those dimensions of time are observable through the form that they take physically. There is an obvious light source. Our planet survives through its relationship with the sun and the access to the energy given to us through sunlight. The Aztecs and the ancient Egyptians worshipped the sun. I would not say that I do not, but I do not practice religion or faith with formality. We cannot ignore that light exists, and without pedantry or particulars of scientific debate, we cannot ignore that darkness also exists. I believe we are that which we appreciate and disappreciate, and that we have to worship ourselves before we are able to worship things outside of us to begin to learn what that word could mean. However, we express some gratitude to explore our relationship with light and darkness sensually, with eyesight, and in order to see ourselves and our surroundings, we need them to have a relationship with light, and reflections and refractions of light, artificial or natural. Even those afflicted with blindness know when they are standing in light. The sun appears in the death card. We can, as readers, convert the symbol into all of its various and numerous metaphors and identify its associations. The sun grants us access to a perspective of the truth of a situation. The Star of David, which is a symbol of divine energetic mathematics, arguably illustrates that there must be at least 6 perspectives for a person to arrive to the truth about anything. But, in a figurative sense, nothing is hidden until you begin to notice the shadows cast by figures, and those shadows can represent secrets. In a reading in which a person might have wanted the truth of a situation that had eluded them, they might get the death card and the judgment card in a spread, and in that instance the card might have nothing to do with death whatsoever. Actually, the card itself has very little to do with death, although it quite possibly depicts one. I explain without mystic foreboding, I like the death card. Death and rebirth, as I like fashion, I like death and rebirth. Through the notion of style, I keep my favourite coat from dying, and when you grant the card attention of that metaphor, it's very welcome. Speaking of metaphor, I could convert into childlike metaphor some bombastic narrative explaining existence as the Bible does. Condensed, God energy spoke light into being, and through that sound vibration, earthly matter, the sun, and the planets orbiting the sun became. We have learned that our sun is only an almost insignificant, if well-accomplished star amongst many, and yet it is the source of energy that our arrogant planet needs to survive. Darkscape can be likened to light source's parent or predecessor. Darkness existed first, and we need it to perceive the light as we need light to perceive physical. Once, in the midst of a trance, I authored the history of the universe, with each element known to me assigned a personality and a sentience. I likened the darkness to a mother afflicted with blindness, and the creation of light manifested from a desire to see, be seen, and to have company. Earth was an occasion of a butterfly effect through which became a sun through time and space, with a secret science lab with which the laws of the universe could be explored. The sun being portrayed as and through a child's morality in the absence of maternal or paternal supervision is significant, because I do not know how else we could imagine to understand or otherwise justify a God persona that permits both autonomy and evil for evil's sake, and which affords humanity self-sustenance and yet also poverty. The suggested darkness portrayed by the Grim Reaper in the Death card could be regarded as a representation of a formula older than the sun itself, and that could be regarded as a simile for karma and cyclical human behaviour. The secrets in the implied shadows of the card blocking the sun represent a darkness older than the truth of the card, portrayed by the sun. Imagine very literally, and perhaps with some awe, that the Grim Reaper represents a narrative that outdates the sun itself. That is what I would study if I were a physicist and a tarot card reader. That before we had physical bodies, we might have had a karma or a personal story. This relates to twin flames, and there are numerous attempts throughout the internetscape attempting to give meaning to and explain significance of that notion, but so far on my personal journey, I feel that we exist as energy beings, the evidence of that being only that we think, therefore we are, and then we act. And that the idea, thus, of twin flames far relates to energetic exchanges, thought and idea exchanges, and karmic exchanges with complementary opposites. So far through life play, I have come to some conclusions about karma, also that our actions are accompanied by consequence, immediate or not. So to the course of discussion I return, onto the topic of the death card. Death and rebirth, light and dark. and the darkness or Grim Reaper carries the secrets of the truth. Now I am going to pick apart my subconscious for you so that you might have some insight into what it is that I see, read, and understand of the card, and I am going to reference the Rider-Waite deck. The particulars of the illustrations in tarot matter to me very much. I believe that tarot readers develop relationships with certain artists through interacting with their works. In my deck, I see a skeletal figure representing the Grim Reaper cloaked in an armour of darkness, which I do not rush to equate with evil, but most certainly with secrets. In place of a scythe, I see the Grim Reaper carrying a Tudor rose flag decorated with the number 13 in Roman numerals. I personally associate the number 13 with freedom from the karma of the 12 souls that formerly occupied this universe, a reference to the 12 disciples and Mary Magdalene, whose scriptures were omitted from the Bible. Rome represents a war of liberty versus oppressive governance and occupation in a narrative older than Christ, and here death mounts a white horse of purity which tramples the crown of a man lying on his back as though dead, and with inevitability to restore religious governance to the Vatican in place of the monarchy, as if to say that is the correct order. However, the skeleton grins, as if to say, the change is temporary. That is, it is possible that the Grim Reaper is grinning because he knows that when you overcome one obstacle, such as monarchical oppression and dictatorship, as was the case in Tudor England, narratives incline to repeat themselves. If I were a physicist, I might try to analogize the idea of that suggested temporary change with that of a vacuum, and from a most personal perspective. In early life, we create spaces within ourselves for specific personalities based on relationships built with those that fulfill our emotional and personal needs. And when we lose contact with those people, most commonly our relatives, they are sometimes replaced by someone else with whom we continue our stories, such as romantic partners and friends who become quote-upon-quote family. The card offers several references indicating that our relationship with governance mimics our familial relationships, to me. I do not know at what point it was that I realized that in my romantic relationships I was looking to get to know my own family. I do know that we are the first generation who have really mustered the social liberty to explore our personal lives in that way, through multiple partners. I don't know that with the more we learn about non-physical ties that bind us to sexual and romantic partners, that people would not once again gravitate towards archaic traditions of arranged marriage and celibacy before marriage. That people generations before ours did not already have the answers to our questions for engaging in romantic relationships, and I cannot personally hope to predict how people will react to learn that we are energetically fastened to people that we have been intimate with, as I believe we are, at times with tremendous repulsion. I do not know whether there is greater success to be found in arranged marriages than in marriages of coincidental life occasion, but at times the death card would encourage people to return to values of tradition. Conversely, it might encourage people to discard values that prohibit their personal growth. The Tudor rose depicted in the card with discreet promise might signify a multi-generational underground war heralding death to oppression, death to that which forbids us the freedom to love and to live our dreams, to my most politically minded self. King Henry Tudor VIII was famously responsible for several conversions of Christian denomination to befit his romantic whims sacredly, and the United Kingdom suffered these changes tremendously. Queen Mary Tudor, his daughter, was a monarch famously responsible for the mass murder of many Christians who refused Catholicism. Queen Elizabeth Tudor's reign heralded religious freedom for the United Kingdom, and quite interestingly, she and her favoured advisor Dr. John Dee dabbled in esoterica and tarot in private. Until now, in Europe, spiritual practices that fall short of the 6 major traditional faiths are still taboo. And spiritual practice, save the Instagram marketing of crystals, the only precious stones the poor are permitted to hoard as treasure, is not an acceptable topic of discussion socially. The card could be telling you to keep your mouth shut and to believe that with personal evolution comes great social change. I see a ship on the card, perhaps going to the promised land, But the story of Moses teaches us of ourselves as a species that if we cannot resolve problems with some situational immediacy, they recur, regardless of geography. If you are a god hoping to relocate slaves from Egypt to a land of milk and honey in fantastic abundance, situational circumstances might improve with the situational luxury, but the mentality of a victimized race does not change with such immediacy. A militant vegan might quip that the slavery would transfer to animals of production. I don't know how many cows or goats or bees were harmed in the making of the land of milk and honey, but that allegory is the message of that card. Geography is not the problem. We take our problems with us wherever we go, and they repeat themselves because we repeat ourselves. That is the cyclical nature of tarot, the addictive nature of tarot. The death card might be encouraging you to choose the outcome that leads to the least suffering, but not without knowing that we are reliving a story. The spiral of the Fibonacci sequence teaches that the discovery of truth is a journey of evolving perspective. If you are a novice aspiring tarot gamer, it is likely that you are taken by the details and meanings given to you in the books that accompany your decks. My teachers encouraged me to ignore the books, save learning the stories of the mythical archetypes, and with you I shall do the same. If you really want to learn the tarot, you need to ignore the books. What matters to you is what you read, and for that reason it takes years to learn. The idea comprised by the tarot and by the greatest films of our time and times past, and that which I want you to understand, is that I believe that we are not living any new stories as a species. We repeat our mistakes and we react to our obstacles with the same outlived solutions that keep us bound to our karma. Before I conclude, I would like to discuss karma and samsara using animals. Some animals have never needed to evolve behaviorally. They will have adapted to their environment to meet survival-inclined purpose, and we assign that script with the scope notion of nature. For example, what does the alligator teach us? In the wild, it awaits in hunger a fleshy meal. The spectrum of that which we regard as good or otherwise bad does not apply to the reptile. In our understanding, it is limited by its physical capabilities and its inherent nature. The alligator eats cruelly to survive, and it breeds. This is a natural cycle. This generational habit works for the alligator. It grabs its meal and drowns it and consumes it to survive. Where hunger is the obstacle, the alligator balances two karmas. If I do not eat, I'll die. My body will begin to break down, suffering of the self, or I eat and inflict unavoidable cruelty to other creatures who bear me no danger. The alligator is not bound by virtue. In terms of suffering, we are invited to accept that the suffering of both the alligator and the antelope is the same. It really isn't possible to quantify the relativity of suffering without discussion. This is not intended to be a study, but a testimonial of personal reflection through my own play with the cards, and I hope that I can inspire you to buy a deck and play with the cards yourself.